Her father dragged her by the wrist through the red mud path that twisted up toward the mountain line, where the trees grew thick and wild things watched from the shadows. Her feet bled in silence. She didn't cry. That would have pleased him. Too much. The only thing she said was, "Please let me keep the child." He didn't answer Dot. At the ridge where the trail turned to pine needles, a tall man waded skin coppered by sun and wind, hair bound in strips of rawhide, eyes dark as the earth after rain. He stood with his arms crossed, still as the mountain. Behind him, her father spat at the ground and muttered something filthy. The trade was done in under a minute. No documents. No witnesses. Just shame and smoke on the wind. Dot. The man didn't touch her. He didn't speak either. He simply turned and walked back into the trees, expecting her to follow. She did. Back in town, the saloon girls whispered it like a curse. Etta Miller was sold for carrying a bastard to a redskin for punishment. No one says her name no more. And they didn't. Not once. Not even when her mother passed, and her name wasn't carved on the stone. Up in the mountain, Etta walked behind the man in silence. Her dress was torn, her belly beginning to swell, and all she carried was a thin quilt and a memory of hands that had once held hers under the barn rafters, whispering love. That boy was gone now, run off, maybe dead, and love had proved useless in the end. The man's name was Talon, though he didn't offer it. She heard another warrior call him that days later in passing. He built his own cabin from cedar and stone, lived without mirrors or clocks. A scar cut across his left shoulder, long and white as bone. He made her sleep inside, near the hearth, while he took the earth outside under a lean-to of pine boughs. She didn't understand it. She didn't ask Dot when the baby kicked for the first time. She pressed her palm to her belly and let the breath catch in her throat. It had been weeks, maybe months. Seasons were harder to track up here. Snow still clung to the higher ledges, but the creek ran quicker now, as if the land itself were shedding its silence. Talon came in each evening with meat or berries or strips of bark he used for medicine. He never looked at her too long. Never reached for her. But each night, before sleep, he set a small fire and placed a tin cup of warm broth near her hands. No words, just firelight, and a woman slowly remembering the shape of safety. She cried once quietly, behind the cabin, thinking. He'd gone off to hunt. But he saw her and stood there in the clearing, not moving. She expected judgment, a word, even. Instead, he picked up a piece of carved wood, handed it to her, and walked away. It was a small animal, a fox smoothed by care. He'd made it for the child. She would realize much later. The mountains made no demands. The trees kept their stories. The birds, the moss, the wind through the canyons. None of them asked what shame she carried or who had put it there. And that, more than anything, began to undo her. The cold returned slowly, like an old shame remembered. Mist slid between these pine trunks at dawn, and Etta began to understand that the silence of the mountain wasn't empty. It was full of things no one dared name. Talon rarely spoke, but in his movements there was a kind of care that didn't come from duty. He didn't treat her as a possession, nor as a guest. It was as if she were part of the woods, something wounded he would not touch, but would not let die either. In the second month, she woke with pain. The child moved differently now, deeper, searching for space in a body still clenched from fear. She didn't call for him. She only sat by the hearth, hand resting on her belly, eyes locked in the fire's red. Talon entered, snow clinging to his boots. When he saw her curled there, he said nothing but knelt beside her, laid a firm hand on her back, and stayed there until the trembling passed. That night, for the first time, he slept inside, on the floor near the door. Like a guard dog, Etta didn't sleep. She lay there listening to his breath, low and steady, mingling with the soft shifts of the child inside her. That sound so human, so present held her Dot in the morning. He split. Logs outside, each strike slow and clean. She watched him through a slit in the shutters. The sun caught his face as he paused to wipe sweat from his brow. And in that still moment, she saw the weight he carried Dot inside. On one of the cabin's inner walls, she found a drawing made in charcoal. Faded, crude, almost childish. A woman, with braided hair and two small figures beside her. She reached out, touched it gently with two fingers. Talon came in and saw her there. She stepped back, expecting reprimand, but he only looked at the wall and said, "The snow took them." Nothing more. He didn't speak for days after that, but she made sure he heard her moving. Her steps on the floorboards. The sound of water being poured. The creak of the old chair. As if saying, someone is still here. One clear afternoon, sun drifting through the trees like gold dust, she found him seated outside, carving again. Beside him were three small wooden animals. A bear, an owl, and a deer. Who are they for? She asked softly. He looked up, surprised. For whoever stays. He said she didn't know then if he meant her or the child. But something inside her gave way. That night, she sat near the fire without fear. They said nothing. Just sat, the crackle of flames between them. As if the world beyond the cabin had melted into ash. Dot, the mountain held them both now. A womb larger than hers, full of unspoken stories and half-healed wounds. And for the first time since she'd been traded away, Etta felt herself quietly existing, without. Needing to hide Dot, the days grew longer, warmer. Birds returned to the trees, and sometimes Etta would sit on the flat stone behind the cabin, eyes closed, listening to the wind comb through the needles overhead. Her hands rested over her belly. Now without fear. There was weight there, not just of the child, but of time, of memory. Talon came and went with the rhythm of the woods. He'd built her a chair by the window, carved from pine, shaped cradle. He never asked if she liked it. He simply left it there one morning, the wood still smelling fresh. They lived mostly without words. But sometimes words aren't where truth lives. One dusk, she caught sight of him returning with blood on his sleeve, a thin scratch across his cheek. She stepped onto the porch, hands on the railing. What happened? She asked. He paused, as if weighing whether to lie. Cougar. Came too close. It's gone now. She looked at the scratch, at his silence, then at his hands, stained but steady. You didn't kill it, did you? A pause. No, not yet. He walked past her into the cabin. She stood there a long while, the light fading into shadow across her bare arms. Inside, she found him crouched by the fire, cleaning the blade. She sat beside him, closer than she'd dared before. Neither of them moved away. You didn't kill it because you saw something of yourself in it, didn't you? Talon's hands paused over the cloth. The blade glinted. It was scared. That's all. She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw a man made of battle and mercy in equal parts. Later that night, she dreamed of water deep and dark and moving. In the dream, she stood in it waist deep, belly bare, the baby still inside her. Talon stood on the far bank, watching, waiting. But not crossing Dot in the morning, she found a folded shawl left on her bed, thicker than hers, warm. Outside, she heard him chopping wood again, the echo of the axe like a heartbeat through the trees. Dot in small ways. They began to orbit each other. She'd leave berries on the table. He'd patch a broken shutter without a word. Once, she sang softly to the child while stirring stew, and when she turned, she saw him frozen in the doorway, eyes closed, as if the sound had touched some long-buried string. He didn't speak, just nodded once, then walked away. Their pasts sat between them like ghosts too tired to haunt. But each day, the silence shifted, became something lighter, something not quite peace, but close enough to carry Dot in the distance. Thunder rolled over the ridges, soft and slow. Dot spring was coming. Etta no longer flinched at the sound of storms. The thaw brought more than water. It brought tracks boots where there should have been hooves, and voices that didn't belong to the wind. Talon noticed first. He never said much, but the way he moved changed. He listened harder, sat longer at the edge of the clearing before stepping into the open. One morning, she woke to find a rifle by the cabin door. He hadn't spoken of it, just left it there, polished and loaded. For her, she didn't ask why. She already knew. There were men looking. Maybe not for her. Maybe not yet. But they would come. Still, the days followed their quiet rhythm. Etta began to write against scratches on birch bark, letters to no one, words she couldn't say aloud. She kept them folded in a tin box beneath the bed Talon had built from cedar beams. Her belly swelled heavy now. The child moved often, restless. Some nights she'd sit by the fire, hand pressed to the rise, whispering fragments of lullabies. She barely remembered. Talon would stay outside longer on those nights, sometimes until dawn. But when he returned, he'd leave small things on the table. Herbs, warm stones for her back, honeycomb wrapped in cloth. Once, she asked him if he'd known the sound of children in his home. He nodded too. He didn't say their names. She didn't press. But from then on, he carved slower, as if memory lived in his hands. Then came the blood trail Dot crossed through the North Ridge, near the creek. Not animal. The print was human. Staggered, wounded, a boot dragged in the dirt. Talon followed it with Etta behind him, slow, careful. They found the boy in the hollow of a tree, fevered and pale, shirt soaked through with sweat. Maybe 16, maybe less. Blue eyes wild with fear. "Please," the boy croaked. "I didn't steal nothing." Talon knelt beside him. Etta knelt. The wound was deep. A bullet lodged near the ribs. Old blood dried into his skin. "Who did this to you?" she asked. The boy looked between them, breath ragged. Men in black coats, rode with badges. They said they was cleaning the hills. Said no one should live this far from town. He passed out in her arms. They carried him back, wrapped in a quilt through the thick trees. Talon's face was unreadable. That night, they burned pine needles in the hearth to clean the air. Etta bathed the boy's forehead, whispered comfort he couldn't hear. Talon watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "He won't make it," he said. Etta looked up, eyes hard. "But if he does, we'll be 3. Talon didn't answer. He just stepped into the dark and didn't return till morning. Something shifted after that. The forest felt tighter. The air held its breath. The boy, half-conscious, muttered names in his sleep, names Etta didn't recognize. One night he gripped her wrist and whispered, "Don't let them take me back." She didn't plan to. Neither did Talon, but far below. In the flat towns with their clean hats and silver stars, someone had begun asking again about the girl who'd vanished into the mountains. And this time, they carried more than curiosity. They carried law. They came just after noon. 3 riders, dust-covered, straight-backed, with pistols resting easy on their hips and cold eyes scanning every tree, badges on their chests, shining like teeth. Talon saw them first, from the ridge above the trail. He watched, unmoving, then turned back toward the cabin at a run. Not a word spoken, just motioned fast. Practiced. Etta was outside, hanging linens. She knew by the way he moved, the look in his eyes. She dropped the cloth and went to the rifle. The boy was still fevered, tucked in a bed of pine straw near the hearth. He murmured nonsense through cracked lips, unaware that the world he feared had found him. Talon didn't argue. He handed her a satchel of food, pointed toward the rocks behind the cabin. You'll go high, stay there, wait for dark. And you? I'll send them away. If they don't go? He met her eyes. That same stillness she'd come to trust. Then I won't come back. She didn't cry. There was no time, Dot. She took the boy barely breathing onto her back, wrapped in a blanket, and vanished into the forest. The unborn child heavy at her front, the wounded one heavy at her spine. She didn't look back. Talon stayed. When the men arrived at the cabin, he stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Behind him, the fire burned low. The chair sat empty, and the rifle was no longer visible. Afternoon, said the first one, a tall man with a silver tooth. Heard tell there's a woman hiding up this way. Stole something that didn't. Belonged to her. Maybe a child. Maybe a life. Talon said nothing. The second man dismounted, circling the cabin. You Cherokee? Still no answer. You know anything about a girl named Etta Miller? He blinked slowly, then said, with a voice like dry bark. No doubt the tall man smiled. Shame, pretty little thing. Ran off with some squaw man, they said. Family wants her back. For justice. Talon didn't move. The third man, younger, kicked at the firewood pile. You live alone out here? A slow nod. Must get lonely. Talon stepped forward once. Just once. Not enough to lie. They stared at him, Dot. Then the tall one grinned. All right. If she shows up, you let the law know. You're a decent man. I can see that. Dot. They turned. Rode off, but Talon didn't relax. He stood there until there. Shapes disappeared past the ridge, then ran. He found them in the cave, just as the boy began to seize. Etta held him tight, whispering, rocking, eyes wild with panic. They're gone for now, he said. She nodded. The boy fell still. She looked at Talon, then really looked. They'll come back. He nodded. Next time. We won't lie, Dot. There was no more pretending. No more hiding behind silence. That night, in the small cave, lit by a single flame, and then the tremble of breath between them, she reached for his hand, and he let her. They didn't speak. But there was a decision made quiet. Final. Dot. If the world came for them again, they would face it as one, because no one else had ever stood for her. And he, once again, had something worth standing for. They came back at dawn. 6 this time. 2. With rifles drawn, the others with ropes slung from their saddles. The law had grown bolder. The boy had stabilized just enough to stand, but he was weak. His eyes darted like a hunted thing, and Etta knew he wouldn't survive another run. Neither. Would she? Not now. Not with the baby so close. Talon stood by the fire sharpening his knife. Not for use, just for the calm it gave him. Etta watched him, hand resting on her belly. You don't have to die for me, she said. He looked up, and for the first time in all the long months, something in his face broke open. I already did once. Outside, birds scattered, then hooves. Talon stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Etta followed him, the boy behind her, trembling. The rider stopped 10 feet out. You had your chance to cooperate, arced the tall one. Now the girl comes with us. And the thief, too. He's a child, Etta said. Her voice didn't shake. You'll kill him. The youngest lawman lowered his rifle just slightly. The others didn't. That's not our concern, ma'am. He was caught stealing from the storehouse in Dead Run. You harbor him. You break the law. What law? Talon asked, low. The one that trades daughters like cattle? The leader spat. You've got no say in this, Red Man. The moment froze. Then, the rifle fired. The boy screamed. But it wasn't him who'd been hit. Talon stood still and slowly collapsed to one knee, hand pressed to his ribs. Blood soaked through the fabric, thick and fast. Etta didn't think. She ran. Gunfire cracked through the trees, but she didn't stop. She dropped beside him, hands on his chest. "Look at me, Talon. Look at me." His eyes fluttered open. He saw her. Then he saw the boy behind her, holding the rifle Talon had given her months before. Shaking, pointed straight at the riders. "Put it down, son," shouted one of them. But the boy didn't. "You ain't talking her." Or the baby. Wind still. And the youngest lawman, just a boy himself, dropped his gun. The others hesitated. Etta rose, holding the rifle steady. "You can turn around. You can tell them she's dead. Tell them she was lost to the mountain. But if you take another step," she didn't finish. She didn't have to. They left, all but the youngest, who lingered, eyes full of something like sorrow. Then he turned and followed. When the sound of hooves was gone, Etta dropped to her knees beside Talon. His breath was thin, his skin cold. "Stay with me, please," she whispered. He reached up, fingers brushing her face. "You gave me something back. I didn't know I'd lost it." Then his hand fell, and Etta screamed. It wasn't a loud scream. It wasn't wild. It was the sound of a soul folding in on itself. But he wasn't gone. Not yet. Hours passed. The bleeding slowed. She packed the wound, prayed to gods she didn't know. And in the stillness that followed, she felt the baby turn inside her, as if stirred by the fire of something more ancient than pain. Talon opened his eyes at dusk, and this time she cried without shame. The mountain had taken so much, but it hadn't taken him. Not yet. They didn't leave the mountain. Not even after the wound closed, or the boy regained enough strength to chop kindling on his own. The world below had shown them what it would do with people like them. Too bruised, too brown, too complicated to fit neatly inside the walls of towns. So they stayed. Talon healed slow. The bullet had missed his lung by the width of a hair. Some nights the fever returned, and Etta would press cool cloths to his chest, whispering his name like a tether to the earth. He never called for her, but when he woke, it was always her face. He searched for first. Spring deepened. The snow melted from the high paths, and new green pushed through every patch of earth. Etta walked farther each day, hand on her belly, one hand steadying her on the trunks of old trees. She'd taken to singing again low, forgotten tunes from childhood. She didn't know the words anymore, but the sound comforted the child. And Talon, the boy whose name she finally learned was Eli, grew taller. Quiet like Talon, but with a hunger to prove himself. He trapped rabbit, carved tools, built a pen for a wild goat that wandered into the clearing and never left again. He began calling Talon sir. Then one day, he slipped and called him Pa. No one corrected him. By the time the child came, the sky was rich with birdsong. Etta labored through the night, and Talon never left her side. He held her hand until her nails cut into his palm. He didn't flinch. The birth was hard. Blood, pain, a silence so thick it felt like the trees had bowed in. Witness. Then a cry, small, sharp, alive. A girl. Talon held her first. His hands shook as he wrapped her in cloth, pressed her to his chest, and stood in the doorway where moonlight spilled across the floor. Etta watched him from the bed, sweat cooling on her neck. "You'll name her," she said. He turned, eyes wet. "Then she be called Sonny. What does it mean?" "It means..." The second blessing. He brought the child to her, laid her gently on Etta's chest. The girl's fingers curled around her mother's skin. So small, so certain. They didn't speak again that night. No need. Outside, Eli fed the fire. The goat bleated softly. A bird called from the dark, and inside that small cedar cabin, a family rested. A family no one expected to exist. But the mountain had made space for them, had taken their silence, their wounds, their scars, and turned them into something whole. Morning came in gold. Thin light through the cabin slots, dust floating like prayer. Etta woke to the weight of her daughter curled against her chest, the steady breath of a man asleep beside her, and the quiet hush of a place that no longer felt like hiding. Talon had built a cradle from birchwood. It rocked with the faintest nudge, creaking soft as wind. Through needles, Eli carved her name into its sani with careful hands. The child hardly cried. She stared often, eyes deep and still, like she knew she'd been waited for. The days unfolded slow. Etta moved gently through them, the way one moves in sacred spaces. She gathered herbs, told Eli stories, half remembered from a mother long gone. She sang to the baby in the dusk, while Talon watched from the doorway, hand over his chest, as if anchoring himself to this new life. No one came again. Maybe word had spread. Maybe the mountain had swallowed their trail. Maybe no one dared speak her name now, because they knew she had become someone stronger than what they'd tried to destroy in early summer. Etta returned to the high ridge where her father had sold. Her she brought no hate with her, just a piece of Sani's first blanket. She buried it beneath a cedar tree and whispered thanks, not for the pain, but for what had risen from it. On the way back, she held Talon's hand. He didn't speak, but his thumb brushed the back of hers, steady and quiet. They passed a fox on the path. It didn't run back at the cabin. Eli had lit the fire. Sani slept in the cradle. A bird nested above the doorframe. Talon stood beside. Etta, arms folded, gaze soft. The world didn't want us, she said. He looked at her. Then at the home they built with silence and scars and something that had grown slowly, like roots beneath frost. We didn't need it. That night, the cabin was full of sound, crackling fire, Eli laughing in his sleep, the soft breath of a child in dreams. And for the first time, Etta spoke her own name aloud, not with shame, but with reverence. She had been forgotten. Now. She was known. Since that morning, the mountain never echoed with. Silence again. Would you have left if they came for you? Tell us in the comments what this story meant to you, and if you believe in second chances. Subscribe to Silent Ranch